cryptocurrency and its traction in Brazil, in the US, and Latin America. So this is our next topic. I know many of you are very interested in this topic. That's why we invited Antoine Colasso, who's going to be a moderator in this panel. Please join me here, Antoine. Antoine Colasso is partner at Valor Capital Group. He's also an advisor at Bay Brazil, helping us shape the organization. And please join us here, Ashish Birla. Ashish is with Ripple. He's a senior vice president of a product. Everyone is looking forward to hearing you. So glad you are here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Got easy. Yeah, it's mine.
Thank you so much for having me.
I mean, I think just to start out the conversation, it'd be great to give a little bit more background on kind of what you do, how you came to Ripple, et cetera, and how it came together for you.
Yeah, so I do something called product management, and product management is a little unique to Silicon Valley, or at least started, like the definition of this kind of product management might be a little bit unique to Silicon Valley. But essentially what we do is we work with business development, we work with our customers to understand pain points, and then we formulate the strategy and create the technical product to go out to market. But Ripple's a little bit different in that we, we are at the very bleeding edge of technology, meaning that regulation isn't clear everywhere. And secondly, Ripple is a blockchain-based payment network, meaning my technology is only good in so that it's deployed in the right regions of the world that need this technology the most. And so, our first country that we decided to go very deep on was India. And the second country is Brazil. So I'm really happy to be up here talking to you guys about maybe some of the reasons we joined Brazil. We selected Brazil as a second destination as well.
Perfect, and I think we'll get into that. One question on a more personal note is, how did you get involved in blockchain, cryptocurrency? How did that become interesting to you early on?
Yeah, so when I graduated from undergrad, the internet was just starting to form and take off. And I came out to Silicon Valley in 2000 and started my career in Silicon Valley at an internet company. And that was just, I would like to say I was really smart, but I really thought that the weather out here was better than where I grew up in Detroit. And Detroit has a lot of other issues. It's just nicer out here. But the internet was taking off. So I was like, hey, let's join an internet company. And that was great for career-wise and networking. But then I wanted to do something a little bit more challenging. What's that next thing that was going to happen? So the company I was at got sold to Intel. I didn't want to go to Intel, and so I started playing around with Bitcoin in 2012, and I was like, what company can I join that is in this space? And it turns out in 2012, a lot of crazy people were in cryptocurrencies and in blockchain, so that, I didn't want to join a crazy company, but I did find Chris Larson, who started Prosper, and right across the street, he invited me to a really small office. It's the building next door. And he was thinking about starting Ripple. And I was like, you need me. And he's like, you have no experience whatsoever in fintech. And I was like, I don't care. I'm going to learn. And no one has experience in crypto. It's 2012. So he took a chance on me. He had me lead product, which early on at a startup, that means just basically making sure the bathrooms are clean and there's enough snacks and coffee for everyone. But turning that on, I got into fundraising and starting Ripple. This actual building was not here. It was a parking lot. So a lot has changed in 5 years.
A lot has changed in downtown San Francisco for sure. Who here owns cryptocurrency of any sort? We got a pretty good representation. So tell us, what is Ripple doing? How is it different from the other currencies out there?
Yeah, so Ripple is a tech startup. We just like any other tech startup. We went out and begged VCs for money. Some of you guys invested in us, thankfully. But it's the founders created something called XRP before Ripple. And XRP is a digital asset or cryptocurrency similar to Bitcoin, and they gifted a good portion of the XRP to Ripple Inc. So Ripple has a good number of XRP on its balance sheet. But XRP is an open distributed ledger, just like Bitcoin. Anyone can build on top of the XRP ledger, and it's different than Bitcoin in that we don't use expensive and energy-wasting mining technology to confirm transactions. We use something called the consensus ledger. XRP was built specifically for payments, so it's cheap and it's really quick to send money using XRP.
Please tell me how cryptocurrency works.
So we only have 30 minutes, and that is that. There's maybe we can have another panel on that. That's a complicated topic, but I'll tell you what it's good for in this panel. But
well, why don't you tell us what the solutions what are you trying to solve with Ripple that's different from other cryptocurrencies out there that may be different?
Yeah, so Ripple is really trying to solve the cross-border payment problem. And I'll tell you, at the beginning of Ripple, there were a lot of problems that people thought this technology could solve. And I think one of my favorite stories is that we actually thought that people wanted, early on in 2012, people wanted to pay for things using cryptocurrency. So I developed a credit card, and there's a coffee shop next door here called Red Door Cafe, and we all started spending our cryptocurrency buying lattes. And now those lattes are $30,000 lattes because we were spending our Bitcoin when it was 100. And so, we realized that, listen, there's not a big problem with domestic payments. The big problem is that it is hard to send money into Brazil. And the other thing is that it's hard to send money into Brazil if you're an e-commerce company, because e-commerce companies are sending $200. So Uber, for example, they're doing average driver payout of $50. The wire fees are $40. And so that's not a good business. Maybe in Silicon Valley it's a good business model, but the rest of the world, that's not a really good business model. So, using this technology, we decided that cross-border payments is the big problem. The second thing to realize is that today, if you send money cross borders using the wire system, what you do in 2018 is you actually create a file. You put it on an FTP server, and then once a night, an FTP server, the young folks at my company, they don't even know what FTP is. And I'm telling them, this is how people send money today. And so that part is broken. The second part is, if you want to get money into Brazil, if you want to get money into India or Mexico, you have to have the money there ahead of time. So e-commerce companies, Amazon, Airbnb, Uber, they have huge treasury teams buying, Brazilian real, buying Indian rupee and pesos and just holding it there. That's because it's so slow to move money. Now, digital assets and XRP and Bitcoin, what is amazing about it is that using technology that we built at Ripple, I can actually move money instantly into these countries. And I do that by, our customers send US dollars, for example, into our products. They use digital asset exchanges or cryptocurrency exchanges to convert the US dollars into XRP. That XRP can move instantly into an exchange in Brazil and then convert it again for a Brazilian real. It's real, right? Okay, I wouldn't be an idiot just saying something else. But, Brazilian real and paid out. That whole thing happens in minutes versus holding currency in the local countries or weeks in terms of using the wire system. So that is really important. Second thing is that it costs a fraction of the cost of sending money today. So not $40 in wire fees, it's cents or dollars. So that makes it possible to power the e-commerce world that's generating so much revenue and growth in Brazil, but India and a lot of the emerging markets.
And so you're dealing with a lot of financial institutions, banks around the world. What are the challenges you have as Ripple dealing with them? Obviously, somebody's been making money on this process for many years. You're changing that. You're making it much more efficient. What are the challenges that you have working with the banks and financial institutions now?
Yeah, so again, we were really naive early on. So we thought, listen, Citibank, great company to go after. If we get Citibank on Ripple, you get 1/3 of all cross-border payments on Ripple. That turns out Citibank likes to be slow because they make a lot of money being slow, and they like to charge a lot of fees because they make a lot of So then we sort of thought who's the hungry ones, And so, we started finding, small providers like, Bex in Brazil. You may not have heard of them, but they're one of the fastest growing fintechs in Brazil. But they're small and scrappy. They want to compete with the big guys. Itaú is another client of Ripple. They are a small, they're not a small bank sorry. All right. They're not a global mega bank like Citibank, but they are a massive Brazilian bank. But they are a super regional bank. And using this technology, you can take a super regional player, a hungry player, and make them global and compete with the big guys like Citibank. And so that's like a powerful story to tell, local super regional players, massive super regional players, but, super regional players, use this technology to connect you to the rest of the world and offer something that Citibank can't offer its clients. And that is the ability to send any size payment, the ability to service e-commerce customers, the fastest growing segment of payments out there today.
And so you've talked about Itaú. I think Santander is another partner of yours in Brazil. What do you see as different between LatAm and specifically Brazil and the Brazilian market compared to other markets that you guys work in?
Yeah, so I was super excited when we decided to go into Brazil, and I had my bags packed because I really wanted to go down to Brazil. And then my team said they don't need me. They got this one covered. So I didn't actually get to go, but I did. I sat at home every night reading the notes because
we'll get them down there, right?
I want to go, so maybe not for work, but I'll go for fun. So like a couple of things about Brazil that make it really unique is that number one, they have a lot of liquidity controls. And so, I was hearing from our customers or some of the customers that wanted to send into Brazil is that because of the liquidity restrictions, they move Brazilian real into the country in the morning, and then they have to move it back in the evening. And that's a big friction that's a little bit unique to Brazil. And then also there's currency controls and FX controls in Brazil as well. And so I think that's unique. But on the positive side, the Brazilian regulatory department, the central bank, is actually very forward-thinking, and meaning that there are now 200 some thriving fintechs in Brazil. And I think you guys know this better than I do, so I may be just preaching to the choir here. But that is something that I don't see in a lot of the other places that I've been visiting. And so there's the other interesting thing about Brazil was that it's growing so fast. And like the market and the e-commerce opportunities and the remittance opportunities in Brazil. One thing that was surprising as well is that I thought of Brazil as a receiving destination. But then I realized that Brazil is also growing so fast that more Brazilians are traveling and doing global business. And so one of the fastest growing segments in BTEC, the customer that I was mentioning, they wanted to use Ripple to send money out of Brazil. And so I thought that was really interesting as well.
And so what kind of results are your customers seeing in Brazil specifically from your solutions then?
Yeah, so BTEC is one of our first customers to go live, and I really mean like they weren't the first customer to sign in Brazil, but they were one of the first customers to go live. And they're seeing new kinds of opportunities open up for them because now they can do real-time payments out of Brazil. They're able to compete on cost. And so we're taking this hungry small company and bringing them, something that they couldn't do before. So, hopefully, even more growth stories like that. We're really new to Brazil. We just sort of made it a focus area over the last, I would say, 9 months. So, I'm excited. I think that we're going to do a lot of big things in Brazil. I think the other interesting thing is that so many new folks are using mobile in Brazil to send money and to conduct commerce. And I think that's an opportunity for Ripple to connect those new players. I think we met with not a customer of ours yet, but Ricardo Pay, I think is the name of it, one of the fastest growing wallets out in Brazil.
And so you mentioned a little bit about the regulatory scene in Brazil. How would you compare it to the US or other European markets and so on? There's been an argument saying that actually emerging markets in some ways are more thoughtful in their approach to cryptocurrencies because they're thinking ahead more, and they're more conservative in the U.S. and so on. Have you seen that? What's your thought on this?
Yeah, so what was interesting with the internet is that the United States had really good regulations with the internet. I know you also started your career out here, and that really made United States a leader with internet technology. It's actually been interesting is that it's been the reverse with crypto and blockchain, and that the most forward-thinking countries are the ones in Asia and some of the emerging players. And I think that the governments are really smart. They're saying that, hey, this is a technology that we're not going to be the laggards in adopting. We're actually going to be the first to adopt because of a couple of things. Like number one, the U.S. is already pretty much banked. I mean, a large population of the internet, of the U.S. population is banked. I mean, I think you probably have Venmo, PayPal, 6 credit cards. You're like overbanked. But that's not the case in a lot of the emerging market. But one of the fastest growing trends is that people are getting mobile wallets for the first time. They're getting digitized. In India, the next 5 years, 1 billion people will have a bank account for the first time, but they're not going to go walk into Wells Fargo or Axis Bank in India. They're probably going to use their phone. And so now I think the governments are smart, saying, how can I connect these new digital citizens to the rest of the world? And I think if you're going to do that in 2018, I think you're going to do that with blockchain. And I think that's really smart for them to be proactive in regulation.
So going to that blockchain theme, I mean, as you think about blockchain, what are other areas that you think that could be impacted by blockchain in the future?
Yeah, so I think that the premise of the blockchain, I think what's so unique and what drew me to blockchain and cryptocurrencies really early on is that for the first time ever, you can use this technology to nearly instantly move money from one person to another. Anyone can do this. So even some guy that had no job in Silicon Valley in 2012, me, can move money using this technology with the bad programming skills that I had. And I thought that was wow, if anyone can do this around the world, that's pretty amazing. So moving value or moving payments using this system without any large bank in the way was pretty revolutionary. But I really think that in the next 10 years, almost every financial product you can think of is going to be sort of rethought using this technology, lending, how people short markets, how people raise money. If you guys have heard of the ICO craze, initial coin offering, it's got out of control. And there's a lot of bad things happening and a lot of regulations need to be put in place, but that doesn't mean it's all bad. That just means that, with the proper regulations, that could be an interesting way to raise money for maybe, your next startup, or maybe you want to raise money to build, a building, but it might be a more efficient way to raise money as long as you're complying with the right regulations. And so I think that's going to have a profound effect in the next 20 years. But I think the regulations need to come into place. People need to follow the law, obviously. But I think that it's going to have a big impact across all financial sectors.
I think there maybe even be, I know you guys are very financial sector focused, but I think there also are probably a lot of other areas that blockchain could be very interesting. Even when you talk about privacy and owning your own information and then deciding who you want to give information to, saving that in the blockchain, things like that. I think, I've heard people thinking about medical records, electronic medical records on the blockchain also, where you can control what part of that information you give, and then you don't have to do a history with every physician. You can just give them what information you need to give them. I think there's a lot of interesting things, and the blockchain is really in its early stages, but very, very revolutionary in that way. So I think there's a lot of areas, and financial services is the first area that we're seeing a lot of that happening, but I think you'll see more of that also in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But talking about blockchain a little bit more and the blockchain ledgers, do you see one or very few surviving, or do you see a whole proliferation of them? And where do you see this market going in? And also, I'd like to just tell the audience we're going to open up to other questions, so please think about other questions so that you can ask as well.
Yeah, so it was interesting how quickly maybe not quickly, it's been 5 years, but early on, I think when we were raising money, the common theme from VCs was that this is only going to be one. And I just tell you, except for this guy, most VCs they don't really know, but they told us that hey, listen, it's only going to be Bitcoin, and that's it. Well, it turns out 5 years later, there's now 1,900 of them. So that was one trend that I think was pretty wrong, early on. I think that what you'll see is that there's going to be different use case specific blockchains. So, maybe one for, maybe there's going to be one specializing in payments that's fast and efficient, like XRP, but there could be others for other use cases, and maybe some of the ones that you mentioned for data storage and so forth. And so I think you'll see and also there's capital formation. So how you raise money, lending, all these things. So there could be, hundreds and thousands of millions of these out there. But I think that technologies that solve a problem are going to be the ones that survive. So just like the internet, the early days of the internet, the analogy was that you could just have a PowerPoint, you could walk down Sand Hill Road, you could IPO in 6 months. It was like this whole playbook. But then the shakeout happened. And those that had solved a real problem, like the Amazons of the world, Amazon is now $1 trillion company. So I think there's going to be this shakeout. There already is. But I don't think they're all bad. I think that the ones that do survive are going to be, pretty massive businesses, transformational businesses for the next generation.
Do you think the U.S. will implement more regulation in the space?
Yeah, I think that. I think that they've already said they are. They said they're coming. The SEC has been pretty proactive. I think they're building a team. They're going to definitely look at the. They've already said all this publicly. They're looking at the ICO market. I think that is the first order of business, to make sure that our citizens are safe and from fraud that's going on out there. So I think that's like the first order of business. But I'm pretty confident that the United States does not, and other countries, they don't want to stifle innovation. And so I think that it's just going to take some time. But I think we're going to come out on the right side of this.
Other questions from the audience?
Yes, so what you described about Ripple service sounds like a great use case, and so I hope your company makes a lot of money on it.
I do too.
But my question is, the people who buy XRPs also want to make a lot of money on it. They want their XRPs to go up 10-fold, 20-fold, 50-fold, like Amazon did. And what I've never really completely understood is how your company's success will translate to an XRP going up 5,000%. Because from what I understand, and I've talked to a couple of other young gentlemen here who describe the exact same thing, they take dollars and buy XRPs, which helps kick up that price a little bit, and then instantly sell those XRPs and convert them into reais or euros or yen instantaneously. So I'm still not seeing how the ambitious buyers of cryptos are going to see their XRPs going up like Amazon stock.
Well, so the analogy between Amazon is not between Amazon and XRP; it's between Amazon and Ripple. Both are for-profit companies. XRP is a digital asset. It's open technology. Anyone can build upon it. It just happens that Ripple has a good portion of the XRP that have ever been created. So I think that's the difference. So the question is, do our products use XRP? And one thing to note is that even if the movement of XRP is instant, if you want to convert and send a payment worth $100,000 using XRP, you need to someone needs to hold $100,000 worth of XRP on one of these exchanges out there. That's how liquidity is created. So if you want to buy $100,000 if you want to send a $100,000 payment to Brazil or to Mexico, someone on the exchange, a market maker, a trader, needs to hold $100,000 of XRP to make that market. And so that is, one use case. There are other use cases and other companies building on top of the XRP ledger. Our ex-CTO started Coil. He's building a company that allows micropayments to be built on top of the XRP ledger. There's a whole Spring initiative that was recently launched to invest in the XRP ecosystem, to bring new kinds of companies on top of the XRP ledger. But at the end of the day, all the blockchains are the same. If there's not use cases that solve real problems, then that blockchain won't survive into the future. And I think that's the difference.
Are you saying the technology is separate from the coin? I mean, in terms of its future financial benefit to whoever holds it.
I absolutely. There's XRP, the digital asset, and there's Ripple, the company. I mean, one example is we've had our best quarter at Ripple Inc. Sold more products at Ripple Inc. in the last quarter, have more volume ever across Ripple. But the XRP price token is just correlated with the rest of the market. It's correlated very tightly with Bitcoin. So that's the way that the markets are working right now. Yes.
Hi, Ron Charney. Very interesting things happened last 30 days in Brazil. First, XP Bank that got sold to Itaú Bank announced they're going to launch an exchange for cryptocurrency. 2 weeks ago, this is all over the news that the banks are shutting down cryptocurrency accounts. So is it, in your opinion, I know Ripple is big in Brazil, it's trying to get in there and work with the banks. Is a cryptocurrency exchange and cryptocurrency itself will survive in Brazil with all these changes that's going on?
Well, I mean, I think this is even several years in, it's still really early. I think that large banks are very conservative, and so even in the U.S. the same thing happened. But guess what happened is that new banks were formed, and those banks. There's banks that are now in the U.S. at least specializing in banking for cryptocurrency firms. And so if a large bank decides they don't want to deal with cryptocurrency, that opens up. Which great thing about Brazil is that the fintech environment is very strong. I think that opens up opportunity for maybe even a smaller bank to come in.
Hi, I'm Akita from Amazon Web Services. So how do you see the awareness about blockchain in general, not only in Latin America, but in other geos? We have the perception that blockchain is Bitcoin, cryptocurrency from the deep web. So in general, there's this bad perception. So how do you think about promoting the good awareness of the blockchain technology? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And I think we struggled with this early on as a community around blockchain, is that, folks, the headlines early on were the folks in Bitcoin didn't want any regulation. They didn't want governments involved. They thought the banks were going away. And the other headlines were around Silk Road. And it became really negative. And I think the internet went through similar things where there was just all the bad things you could do with the internet, like me walking outside and getting kidnapped or something, were all like the headlines in the internet. But I think that what's changed in 2018 is that there are concerted efforts now with the community to talk to regulators. And so Coin Center is a great organization that is going out and proactively talking to regulators and informing them about the good things. We've built technology on top of digital assets and blockchain that make it safer to exchange information, compliance information, and stay compliant with the regulation. So I think I think that the folks are starting to see that this technology can be used for really good things. I mean, in the United States, I think maybe less than 1% of folks have digital assets, but I think in Korea the number is in the 7%. I mean, so the awareness in a lot of Asia is very different than the awareness in the United States and Europe.
I also think it's important to understand that blockchain is the fundamental structure underneath, but fintech is one example, right? There are many examples. There are smart contracts that are coming up, digital rights management, which can be done through the blockchain, et cetera. So again, there will be ups and downs, I think, with cryptocurrency, with blockchain, et cetera. But I think the underlying technology, it's important to understand that it has many use cases also, right? And so I think distinguishing that from just pure cryptocurrency only is important as well for when you're talking about blockchain specifically, right? They're not synonymous, the two necessarily.
Also, just keep in mind when the internet got going, we weren't streaming Netflix. I mean, we were you typing something and it would take forever to read a newspaper on the internet. And when we got started in the building across the street, total daily volume across all crypto exchanges, that means how much was being traded, was $2 million per day. There were only 4 crypto exchanges in the world. And just 5 years later, you see that the average trading volume is 20 billion. There are 200 some exchanges, globally. There's one exchange that has more users than Deutsche Bank and has generated more revenue in January than Deutsche Bank at a monthly basis. And so like the $20 billion is still small. I mean, the daily FX volume is in the trillions, but it's come a long way. But we're still in this infrastructure phase. And we're building out the plumbing and the pipes. I think there's now 2 crypto exchanges in Brazil, which is 2 more than 3 years ago. So I mean, it's happening, but you got to lay the roads out first to allow some of the new innovations to be built on top of this.
And the only other thing I would say is also a lot of the speculation got a lot of press over the years. There's also just a lot that's happening on the utility side of blockchain. And so I think that doesn't get as much publicity, but it's important to understand that there is utility, as you guys have talked about and so on. So the speculation is what gets all the headlines. And we're not going to talk about the fake news. That was a previous panel. But it's important to understand also what's underlying that and the technology and what it really brings fundamentally to as an infrastructure. And I think that's also important to understand more broadly.
The question is around, we are at the time of infrastructure, and we talked about this technology can provide lots to many people, but some research has started to show people building the infrastructure has actually increased income distribution, perhaps. You has a role of this technology can do amazing stuff and transfer things, but we have yet to see that case. It's more around people have made a lot of money on speculation, on building the infrastructure. We will get there. How do you see your role being one of the early ones at Ripple of actually getting to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you joined in 2013, you joined blockchain, one, you were crazy. Number 2, you weren't in it for the money. And again, what struck me about this technology is that if you go to places like India and you see how hard it is to get your remittance from a family member that's working abroad, and how much of that is gone in waste in terms of fees, it's crazy. I mean, I had one person tell me that they spend a day weekly to go travel to the nearest location to receive cash, and sometimes the money's there and sometimes it's not. But that's all going to change with mobile phones and so forth. And so that's what's amazing about this technology, that people are going to be able to receive money instantly. They're going to be able to be connected without the expensive oligopolies or monopolies that dominate cross-border payments today. And I think that's the beauty of this technology. The exchange I mentioned that is now the size customer base wise as Deutsche Bank. I mean, that was started by 4 or 5 people just a couple of years ago. And that's, again, that's a small example of this technology and what it can do to empower people to build on top of it.
Just a quick follow-up, that exists, but it's still to the mass. You as an individual who played a role into it, what are some of the cases where payment has, M-Pesa has done some of that? You at Ripple, how do you, maybe either examples or how you individually or as an organization can speed that up?
Yeah, I mean, we can speed that up by getting more of these, telcos, the Ricardo Pays, the Airtels, the Geos onto Ripple faster, so that the folks that need it the most can get access to it. I mean, that is the vision. That's what we're pushing forward for in India and Brazil, and that's why we picked some of the emerging markets as well, is because that's where we see the biggest uptake, the underserved people from the current system, the underserved businesses that aren't being met using the existing system. I think that's what this technology is about.
If we can do one last question, yeah.
Excuse me, I'm CEO of an investor relations advisory firm, and most of our clients are in Latin America, and particularly in Brazil. And I have an office in Brazil, and I am subject to this issue of I regularly bring funds out of Brazil, and we use Itaú, and especially recently when you see currency rates, the volatility of what we're collecting, it comes in, goes out, and it's ridiculous. So please give me the name of that fintech company again.
They're getting a lot of publicity here. It's called BTEC.
This is
BTEC, BEETECK. Oh,
E-Tech.
H, sorry.
Clearly,
I did win the
Ito
spelling bee
is-
contest
Ito
in
is
sixth
not
grade. but-
reaching out to its customers that are sending foreign exchange out to offer them this opportunity.
Yeah, so like one thing that we are working on is spreading awareness of some of these smaller providers that are using this technology. So maybe like some co-marketing with BTech, so that folks like you can come onto the system and use it. But like the SME payments, like small business payments, is one of those underserved customer segments that we're really passionate about. Retail remittances, again, it's a hard business. The larger city banks of the world, they don't want that business anymore. I think that's another good use case for this technology, the underserved or misserved populations and segments.
So we've run out of time, and if everyone could give a big hand of applause to Ashish. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Ashish just came from a trip. I appreciate you be here. Thank you also, Antoine.